Hello, good
Hi.
evening. It's Mark here and
Steph?
beautiful wife, Stephanie. I have the privilege of serving as the senior pastor at the Vineyard Church, and it's just so great to be together online. What is the final webinar of this, what has been an amazing 3-week series, where the wonderful Jon and Andrea, who we'll introduce in a moment, have been sharing amazing highlights from the 4 habits of all successful relationships. And what I've just loved about it is they've been addressing specific relationship challenges, haven't they? Likely to have been highlighted by life under lockdown.
Most definitely.
A bit like a magnifying glass, isn't it? But why don't we say hello to Jon and Andrea? Jon and Andrea, hello, good evening. Are you guys there?
We are here. We are here.
Hello, good evening.
Great to be here.
Yeah, so good to see you guys. Are you well this evening?
We are very well. We're very well. Thankfully, the light's on. Had a bit of a challenge earlier, but the lights are back on.
Well, we're glad the light's on for what is going to be, no doubt, an amazing evening. And I know that on the first week, you guys gave a bit of an overview of your background. But for those, who haven't maybe seen the first week, maybe just give a bit of an overview of Jon and Andrea. You know, they've been in relationship education for, over 25 years now, guys.
That's right.
That is impressive, yeah. And you guys are the co-founders and co-CEOs of Soulmates Academy. You guys help people take personal responsibility. And I love the phrase that you guys have come up with, how they show up in relationships.
That's right.
And I think that's so true, isn't it? You just show up in relationships. And you might have heard of these guys because they did what was and is an amazing TEDx talk around 4 fundamental habits for building strong relationships. Now, how many millions of views is almost approaching? 1.2 million, isn't it?
Exactly.
Almost 1.2.
We're at the
we're
last,
blown away, actually.
We're blown away, but we sort of monitored it very closely all the way up to 1 million, and then we've kind of lost touch with it now. I was talking to a mate the other day. He says, "What is it?" I said, "Well, it's between 1.1 and 1.2." He says, "What's 100,000 views between?"
Yeah, wow, amazing. I'm grateful if 30 people tune into my talk. So listen, before we introduce tonight's talk, Steph, why don't you give us a bit of a recap over the past couple of weeks?
So a way of recap, I think week 1 we talked about, the question discussed was, how can someone we love be so frustrating at times?
Good one.
Yep.
Why are you looking at me like that?
Relate to that. And there, Jon and Andrea looked at how habit number 1, be curious, not critical.
Love that. So good.
Week 2, the question discussed was, how can we manage conflict better when our emotions are running very high? And I know having 3 young children and being in lockdown, emotions are running high. So
nothing with me though.
Absolutely.
Perfect. No. And there, Jon and Andrea looked at habit number 1, be careful, not crushing.
Yeah.
So,
and that is habit number 2, of course.
That was number 2.
Yeah.
Be careful, not
sorry,
crushing.
habit number 2. Yes,
No,
be careful, not crushing.
That's a good habit. So it brings us to habit number 3 for this evening.
Correct.
Which is ask, don't assume. And so, Jon and Andrea, what question are you guys posing for us this evening?
Yeah, ask, don't assume is a really huge area. But what we're looking at is, how can we create healthy boundaries, and how in all our relationships at home and at work, and how can we use this time to design or redesign a more sustainable work-life balance now that we have the option to work at home. And it's something we're very passionate about, something that we've been kind of living and learning over the last few years, but it has really come into sharp focus because of lockdown and coming out of lockdown, what the new normal, or as Jon likes to say, a future normal.
Future normal.
What that looks like.
Absolutely. Well, we can't wait. I think without further ado, let me just say to you guys that are online, fire over your comments and questions, and it's over to wonderful Jon and Andrea. Can't wait.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's our pleasure. So here we are again. I can't believe the 3rd webinar is coming on so quickly.
Come up so soon.
So we have to jump straight into this one.
Jumping straight in. I mean, what's really interesting is that for all its challenges, and there's some real disaster stories about COVID-19 out there. We know friends who have had real tragedies in their lives and so on. But I think that aside, we watched this listened to one of these experts talk about markets and market theory and so on. And he said, really, there's going to be an 18-month recession that comes after this COVID-19
the L
collapse,
curve,
the L-shaped
recession that they call it.
And he actually predicted a 3-month period of shock before you get to some sort of recovery, before you then start to grow and build and get back to sort of normalcy again. And pretty much bang on. We're at the end of 3 months, almost 3 months to the day, to the week at least, of the initial lockdown. And, you know, people are now starting to think, what does the future look like? So they're kind of used to some of the challenges of living together in lockdown, of, you know, social distancing, etc. And really what's starting to pop up now is that for all its pain, COVID-19 actually can be or could be a fantastic opportunity to just stop and press reset and actually think about the future. What does that want? Because what's interesting is a lot of people who never worked from home before and always had this thing against working from home, now they've had to do it. Some people are saying, there are a couple of things in there that I don't actually like. I don't mind so much. Some things I actually like. Maybe in my future normal, I want some of those aspects of that. I don't necessarily want to work from home 5 days a week all the time, but some aspects of that. So our question to you is, what are you, is there anybody out there who's having that similar experience, who is feeling that actually going back to work, they want to go back 2 or 3 days a week maybe, and not necessarily full time?
Yeah. What are your thoughts on working from home, and whether you want to continue doing it, do a bit of it, not do it anymore at all because you've had enough? Just pop those in the comments as we go through. But what we want to talk about is, how do we go about using this wonderful opportunity to just press reset, just pause a minute, think about what we want our ideal life to look like, and how we can use the experience of lockdown to shape that. It's about, to get there, the first thing we need to do is to become really clear on what's important to us. And I think a lot of us have reconnected with that more by being at home with loved ones, with our partners, with our children, with our parents, just having more time, giving us a chance to think about what really matters. So we have to think about what's important to us. Where do we need to create or recreate healthy boundaries to defend time and space to pay attention to those things? And how can we go about actually designing the ideal work-life balance that will work for us? But it's not about, because the more that we're able to do that, the more we're able to ask for what we want in our relationships once we've established these healthy boundaries and we're clear on the work-life balance that we want, not in a selfish way, but in a way that allows us to create more trust and mutual respect in relationships, because you're asking and you're being clear on what would make the relationship work for you, rather than assuming people understand. Absolutely. And you know the dangers we can get into with assuming and the expectations that creates. And we'll unpack that as we go through the session. But what it's not doing it in a selfish way. It really is living out. There's a verse that we love talking about, Ephesians 2:10, which says we are God's masterpiece, where he's created us anew in Christ Jesus so that we can do the things he planned for us to do long ago. So we're all made on purpose for a purpose, and learning how to identify values, create healthy boundaries, and schedule the ideal work-life balance is about living out that purpose, so that we're only doing what we're supposed to do and not just living to other people's agenda. And those are the things that we're talking about. So, and in essence, that's what habit 3 is about. Ask, don't assume. Know what it is that you want and be able to ask for it, so that you can build a trust and respect in relationships.
Emma knows what she wants. She's asking for more work, less home, please.
I can't wait to go back to the office. That's just because you have great colleagues, Emma. Be like, I want not to be not as busy as I was before. Absolutely. It would be a tragedy if we went back to this hectic, frenetic rat race. And that's why we're doing what we're doing, to just help you think about and then lead yourself in how you do life after lockdown. So we're going to look at how to identify what matters most. We're going to look at how to create the healthy boundaries to protect the things that are important to you, and then how to design a work-life balance in all of about 15 minutes. So here we go.
Here we go. So to start off with, how do we identify what matters most to us? And that's the question, I guess, that is at the heart of it. Because quite often we don't take the time to actually stop and think, you know what's really important here. We're kind of just in the fray, in the mix, and just go to moving from one thing to the next, and don't actually take the time out to do some of the important things.
Yeah.
So if I can move this mouse around, there we go. Yeah. You need to start by deciding what you value the most. And there's a framework that I came across years ago now. We had a business coach in one of the organizations I was in the city, and he spoke about 5 Fs. 5 Fs that I know it says 8 on the screen there, but he spoke about 5 Fs that he said were foundational. He thought were foundational to your life. And they went like this. It was interesting. It was in a business setting, but he said, actually, guys, you know what? You want to start with faith, because faith is actually one of those things that is so fundamental to you as a person, whether you have it or you don't. He wasn't making a judgment call. He was just saying, if you have faith, and it can actually be quite foundational to you. And if people start to take decisions that impact your faith, you can get pretty, hot under the collar about that.
And faith impacts our own value system.
It absolutely
and the decisions that we take. So you need to make room for that. And
equally, if you were sort of anti-faith and people started coming to you with faith, again, there could be some big issues there. So what he said was, look, faith is one of these important things. It's pivotal. You want to decide what's important to you in the faith space and do that first. Secondly, he said family. You want to think about family and think about the sort of family relationships that you want now and in the longer term. And if you really want to have those strong relationships down the road, and you've actually thought about that, well, guess what you've got to do? You need to invest in those relationships now if you want to have those relationships down the road, because you kind of get what you reap what you sow.
Yeah.
Do what's important on the family front. Thirdly, he said, it's worth thinking about your friends and the friendships that you want to have in your latter years, perhaps. And for me, what that made me think was, maybe I'm an old pa sitting on my veranda on my rocking chair. Who do I want to have rock up and say hi, or who do I want to go visit, or what have you? And I said, well, you know what I need to start doing is investing in those friendships from now. The people that I want to be close with, let's identify a few friends that we think will be good friends, will be good influences on our values and values of our kids and so on. And why don't we invest in those relationships rather than just let them go dry over time? If they don't call us, we don't call them, and they kind of disappear. Why don't we have on purpose friendships that we can build? Finances was his 4th one. And again, he said, really, no, actually, fitness was his 4th one. And he said, fitness is all about your health and your
ability to enjoy the life.
Exactly. To not be in a wheelchair. God forbid, if that's what happens to you, it's what happens. But if there are things you can do that keep you out of that and keep you away from diabetes and away from heart conditions and so on, why don't you take those choices now with your diet and exercise so that you don't end up having to suffer for them later? Finances was number 5 for him, which was really, how do you make all the other things happen? Because you need to be able to live and eat and have expenses and so on. But he stopped there. And actually, what has struck me I've been applying that model to my diary planning and management, and we talk a bit more about this in a moment. But it struck me that there were a few things missing, at least from my life, when I stopped at 5. So I took the bold step of adding to the 5 Fs and put the other 3 on. And in the order that I normally think of them, and as fulfillment, I think, is actually quite important for me. What is it that I want to do for me that makes me feel as a person? And for me, fulfillment back in the day was, things like learning a new language or learning a musical instrument. I haven't really done a whole lot. I haven't made the time to do much of that. But
you're running a new business now.
Running a new business, to be fair. And actually, that steps into number 7 for me, which is about foundation, which is about where can you give back? What are you doing with your life that actually makes a contribution, makes a difference in this world? And for me, that's actually bubbled up to be one of the more important things, which is kind of why we do what we do at the moment. And then last year, for the first time, I actually included fun in there as well, because I figured, unless you're on purpose for my personality type, and we looked at this a couple of sessions ago.
For beavers, remember the beavers, session 1.
Fun does not necessarily feature high up on the list of priorities. But unless I put it in there, I end up living a fairly dreary life, but there's not much chance of that with Andrew. We always have fun anyway. But I thought, why can't I be a bit more on purpose about having fun in our lives? So I put it out there as the 8 Fs, as a framework for just thinking about really what's important to you. And as you're thinking about that, actually think about, if nothing really springs to mind, think also about what grates on the inside when you're not doing it. And for parents with young kids, sometimes, or quite often, it's, you're too busy at work and you don't get time to spend time with them just reading or going to their sports days or activities they do, or all that kind of stuff, just because you're too busy and you feel this guilt and it's a grating on the inside that you feel. So think about some of those things. We're going to give you a moment and start looking at how you do it in practice. But these are some of the things that we want you to be thinking about.
Yeah. So as you think about what's important to you, what we need to do next is to start examining the boundaries that we have in our lives that allows us to give time and space to each of the things that we've decided are important to us. And in thinking about boundaries, we could have a whole day session on that, but we're going to look at three things in this session. We're going to look at the first is boundaries, personal boundaries, and creating healthy relationships with personal boundaries. Because we're God's masterpiece, it means that we each have a calling on our lives, so that even in a marriage, there is a healthy boundary between you and between your spouse or your partner. So establishing good, healthy personal boundaries is about being able to be true to yourself, to develop your voice, to be free to have an opinion, to share, discuss an opinion, to feel heard. I want to refer to a question that we didn't get the chance to address last week. And the question was, how do you distinguish between handling conflict and experiencing abuse? And this is a really important question, and it really plays into what we're saying here about personal boundaries. The assumption that we've been going on in all these webinars is that the relationships are generally healthy, and we're helping good become better by, the conflict is a natural part of any relationship. So how do we do it well is what we were talking about last week. Talking about unhealthy relationships and relationships that are sadly in some cases abusive is kind of outside the scope of what we're talking about today. But I want to flag up some warning signs where you should really think about what's happening and seek help if this rings true for you. So we need to decide on what's acceptable behavior for ourselves, meaning the way we behave to people and the behavior we accept from them, behaviors towards us. And of course, God's already set the standard of how we should behave with each other. Absolutely. Sometimes we fall short, which is why there's forgiveness, and which is why we're doing this. But sometimes we fall horribly short, and that's when it goes into unhealthy behavior. And the warning lights to look for, where it's just not okay anymore and it's time to ask for help, are things like where there's codependency, you're sacrificing yourself to please other people in a real way. It becomes a pattern of behavior where their voice is more important than yours, where you feel like you don't have a voice, or you can't share an opinion, or you can't influence anything.
That's not healthy.
That's heading into it being unhealthy. Of course, where there is physical abuse, that's definitely not healthy, and that's the time to get help. So what we're saying is, the more we become clear on our own personal boundaries, and the more we become clear on what's acceptable standards of behavior, realizing that we are God's masterpiece and that we're relating to people who are God's masterpiece, and we each have God's call on our lives, then the more we can create healthy boundaries around our personal space and around the behaviors that we give and the behaviors that we tolerate. But again, I will say, if you find that this is an area that's a challenge for you, please seek help and don't leave it there.
Absolutely.
Because you're worth more.
Yeah. So if that's about the personal boundaries and the space, the other thing that you want to think about also is the people. Yeah. The people in the relationship, because that's also very important. The reality of life, modern day life, with I guess with the technology that enables us to be 24/7 on, with the global economy that we live in, with the pressures of living in lockdown now with social distancing or no real contact, there are lots and lots of reasons why relationships, interpersonal relationships suffer. And usually it's the people that matter the most to us that end up suffering, because we're just not thinking about how we're coming across. I mean, the example we show here is, somebody who's working late into the night in bed and, just thinking they've got to get stuff done because of the pressures of getting it out there. But really, is that the most important thing? And really, there are two pressures that tend to impact. One is this feeling that we're being judged from the outside and that we always need to be there's a standard that we need to be meeting in our work and getting stuff out there and, feeding that machine or just, getting the job done.
Seem to be busy and always logged on the computer.
Always logged on. So there's a big pressure there. But there's also a pressure that comes from the inside, which is pressures from frustration, where you're not supposed to be in bed working because it doesn't go down very well, but you just feel like you have to do that. You kind of feel trapped sometimes. There's an example. There's I guess she was a client that we were talking to who was saying she was a global project manager, and because she had offices that she was working with around the clock. She was based in London, but she'd find sometimes she'd be home and she'd sort of sit in the car and do more work there, or nip out of the house to go to the car to do work, so it didn't impact the family.
Oh, it was because of the tensions at home where her partner, she couldn't afford for her partner to see her
had
still
enough
working.
Of it. Yeah, it was just too much. So you really have to manage those pressures. And what's interesting is you've got to set boundaries to be able to do that, because nobody can respect the boundaries that you don't set.
Yeah, my favorite line. Yeah.
You don't set the boundaries. How can they respect it? How can you respect it? You've got to have those boundaries in place to be able to do that. And key to doing that is try not to replicate the patterns that you already have. So if you were used to going to an office and working XYZ hours, now that you're working from home a little bit more, the danger is in just thinking that you can take work out of the office, put it in the home, and it works exactly the same. It doesn't. The reality is expectations around you, on you, will be different. Your expectations of yourself, your desires to want to spend more time with the kids or do things differently.
Or be available for pressure points at home.
Exactly. Yeah. Be available to help out in those pressure points and what have you. And the expectation is that you're there, so you should be available. And then you say, well, actually, I'm here, but I'm not here.
We've done that.
We've been there. We've had those conversations. The reality is, for a relationship, it's not helpful. What you want to be doing is developing a schedule that works. Have the conversations around some of those issues, some of those challenges, and then develop a schedule that works and takes into account all those different things. Have the conversations. You're going to need to have conversations with work colleagues, with bosses, with your partner, with kids. Find out what works and what doesn't. But we're going to come back to that in a moment.
Yeah, well, that leads us nicely onto the third area that we want to talk about in terms of creating healthy boundaries, and that's around expectations of roles and responsibilities, both in terms of work. John mentioned the expectations that team leaders can have, that you're just going to replicate office hours, and that's never going to work. So, time to have courageous conversations around the times that you can genuinely be available and focused, and times when there's just too much going on at home to even try it. In life, multitasking and, trying to be doing everything all at once, freewheeling it is overrated, and it just sets you up for stress, especially when work, home, life, children, everything collide under one roof. And the more we can be clear about the boundaries and about when we're doing what, the easier life becomes. But this business of roles and responsibilities can be a real challenge in lockdown, especially when you assume that things will continue as they were, even though life's shifted big time. Tell me, yes, Karen, that's my favorite line at the moment. Just type into the chat box, what do you want to set or reset healthy boundaries around? Where do you think the boundaries might have cracks in it that you might want to address? Because one of the examples or one of the experiences that we had was, for about 15 years, I was running a business from home to work flexibly around the children. And then 3 years ago, when we started this business, I was back to working full time. But because we were already in the habit of me taking charge of everything in the home, the cooking, the laundry, the everything, I just continued in that vein, even though I was working full time, neck and neck with John during the day. And then it's like at nighttime, my second job kicked in, and I found myself.
And I was happy to let Andrew continue.
And he was very happy to let me do it. And I found myself getting resentful, because it's like, we're neck and neck during the day, and then suddenly it's my job to do all of this. So we had to have a conversation around this. And if you need to have a conversation around this, I really encourage you to do it, but to do it carefully, because for me, it challenges our assumptions that we come into the relationship with about what a good wife is, what a good mother is, what a good father is, what a good husband is, and what roles they should do and what responsibilities they should have, usually because of how we've seen it patterned before. But the place that we want to get to is to become mutually supportive, where we look at the season of life that we're in and discuss who has the capacity, who has the skill, who can do it with ease, which job is more, which role or responsibility or chore is more suited to whom, just based on where you are in life. And every time life shifts, this is a conversation we need to have again, so that you can feel supported rather than taken for granted or find resentment filling that space where you should have trust and respect. And we mentioned roles and responsibilities in particular because there was a survey done a few years ago by Violator, the cleaning company, and they found that a third of the arguments in homes is because of this, the perception of this unfair split in chores. And of course, with women going into the workplace more and faster than men are probably taking up childcare and roles at home, this is a conversation that needs to happen more and more. Millennials, for example, expect matched efforts, and their marriages are coming into challenge sometimes because they feel like that the efforts aren't matched, and they typically dinks, double income, no kids. So it's a very important conversation. Were you going to say something?
No, just going to say it's a conversation that's worth having, not just with partners, but with children as well. I mean, with life in lockdown, where for a lot of people, the kids are home and around you. For us, certainly their assumption was, well, if they're not doing schoolwork, they can do Minecraft, or they can play, and they can do different other things. And we're like, well, the amount of work in the house has just gone up by virtue of the fact that you're around, more meals to cook where you would have had lunch at school and so on. There are other things to be done, dishwashers to be emptied, clothes, all sorts of things to be done. Let's have it. We had a conversation around, well, guys, all these things need to be done. How can you help? How can we divvy up roles and responsibilities in a way that works for everybody, rather than their assumption that, well, it's always happened.
Yeah.
Just
it will continue
to happen. Got to have those conversations.
Yeah. And then, of course, with lockdown, where we could have had help, like with ironing and with cleaning, that's now down to us again at home. So the more that we learn to have the conversation every time life feels a bit overwhelming, so we can step up, step in, and help support each other, so we have time for each other, have energy for each other at the end of the day. So tread carefully, because there can be some serious roles and assumptions, core values that get challenged when we talk about who does what in the home. But to make life feel more fair and more mutually supportive with trust and respect, this is a conversation that we wanted to bring up.
Karen saying that we've abandoned the "this is his job, this is my job" thing. Is absolutely the way to go. You've got to just think, for this season of life, what works? What works? What's the more equitable thing to do in this season of life? So
I love it. I have to work at it though, as I hate the bins. I hear you. Absolutely. So then how do we design this work-life balance?
So how do we do it then? What's the trick to doing it to get it to work for us? Because the reality is there is no balance. There is no balance without healthy boundaries. You may have heard the expression that your diary is a reflection of your life priorities, or how you're living out your priorities. Absolutely, that's most people's reality. What we want to do is get to the point where your diaries actually reflect what's most important to you.
Yeah.
And the best or a brilliant example of this, or description of this, we heard was with Stephen Covey. Actually talks about it in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
The big rocks.
What he says is he shares a story of a lecturer talking to his classroom, and he says, okay, to make this point, he gets a large jar out, and he gets some big rocks, and he fills the jar with these big old rocks, puts them all in right up to the top. And then he asks the class, is the jar full? And most people say, yeah, it's kind of full. He stuffed as many rocks in as he could. So he gets a jar of gravel out, and he pours it in. And of course, the gravel goes into the jar and fills all the little cracks and nooks and crannies. And then he gets to the top again, and he asks the question again, is the jar full? And by this time, the classroom are onto him now. So they say, oh, no, it's not. He says, you're right. And he gets sand out, and he pours the sand in. And of course, the sand goes in and fills in all the little spaces and gets it right up to the top. And again, they ask the question, is the jar full? And of course, the whole class at this point says, no, the jar is not full, because they're onto him. So he says, you're right. And he gets a jug of water, and he pours the water in, and the water goes in and fills it right up to the top. And then he says, is the jar full? And they kind of look at him kind of hesitant. And he goes, okay, guys, the jar is full at this point. The jar is full. But he says, okay, the jar is full. What's the point? And a little smarty pants in the corner of the room says, the point is, if you you can always find, it doesn't matter how much you have on your plate, you can always find space to squeeze other little jobs in. And he goes, no, that's not the point, brilliant though it sounds. The point is, if you put the big rocks in first, everything fits. If you don't, and you put the other little bits and pieces in first, it's a mess. And he goes through an example to show that you can't get the big rocks in at the end. And the point is, in your lives, what are the big rocks? Have you identified the big rocks, and do you have them in your diaries first? Because if you don't, you ain't going to get the other things in. So very important to identify them first and then put them into the diary.
A very, very good point. And it's about making the space for them, starting when you say you're going to start, whatever it is you're going to start, and ending when you're going to end, whether it's work, whether it's time at home, one-on-one time, all the things we spoke about, making time for the relationship. And if you start with the big rocks, you can always shove the other necessities, emptying the dishwasher, doing laundry, doing meals, and so on, around the really important stuff. You find your mind's far more at peace because the really important things have their space. I'm going to show you how I've done it, because the best thing to do is to write it down. I have to say before let me just go back a bit. I have to say, hear this from somebody who does not like structure. Hear this from somebody who,
that's not me, by the way,
for a long time resisted the idea of needing to plan, of needing to be that detailed. It was painful. It felt like it was putting me in a straitjacket. But I have discovered that Aristotle said years ago, through discipline, there is freedom. And I can't believe I'm even saying that, but I am totally sold. There's a verse that I want to share with you that says, from Proverbs 21, verse 5, careful planning puts you ahead in the long run. Hurry and scurry puts you further behind. So I'm going to show you how I translated all this theory of big rocks and the key values and the 8 F's and healthy boundaries into a structure that changes probably every 2 months, every 3 months.
Let me just say, you've been brainwashed.
I've been brainwashed.
Has.
Too much beer. I've been influenced 27 years. But I have to say, this is just an example of how do you make space for yourself, for your partner, for your children, for your work. And of course, in doing your work, there's a great author who says there are only ever half a dozen things that really move the needle on any job that you're doing. So in the space that you've identified the work, to do work, you need to identify when you're going to get those half a dozen things done, because we can spend all day filing and refiling, been there, done that, answering emails and responding to social media and not doing anything, and then feeling exhausted and then feeling frustrated that you don't have anything to show for it. So what this is about is putting the big rocks in first. Anything in pink, I start the day. I have to say, I'm still working towards a consistent 5 o'clock, because if I go to bed late, as we tend to do with everybody at home, the 5 o'clock gets sabotaged. But even if I do it 2 times, 3 times a week, it still means there are some mornings when I have the freedom of silence, nobody in my space, just me and God. I can think, I can pray, I can plan, I can just allow my soul to breathe and to soak in some stuff, because I can't give what I don't have. And that the more we're in lockdown, the more important my time is to me. The dark blue is time with the family, and we've committed that while the boys are home, we'll do lunch together, we'll do dinner together. We've gotten in the habit of doing movies together. The Wednesday evening is time out with John, because that's the one time that the boys are plugged into their connect groups. We should be doing our connect groups, but we've taken that time as our time, the only time that we can defend, and so on. This is mine. There's a link that we have that we can share with you of a template of how you can get yours done, where it talks you through the steps to do it. And all I can say is just start, because it allows you to be authentic and aligned. It allows you to say yes without hesitation and no without guilt, even to good things, because remember, good is the enemy of best. And we can be so busy doing good things, but that's not the things we're supposed to be doing in this season. And remember, the season changes: pre-kids, with kids, after kids. Good is the enemy of best, unless you know what your values are and you create healthy boundaries around them and make space for them in your diaries. So that's really what we want to share. Ben's just put the link up, but this is what it's a link to a blog article that will walk you through how to create your own template. You'll get some things right, you'll get some things wrong, you'll want to rework it. And then, am I shaking it? You get some things right, you get some things wrong, rework it, keep trying it. It just gives you something to aim for, because if you don't have that, then anything goes and you'll drop the wrong balls. But if you have that, even if you miss it, you'll know what you've missed and you know what you need to redress. And I promise you the focus that you can then work with, because all the important things have their space in your schedule. It's worth going through what I found to be the pain of getting to the point where you have a schedule that you can work to. Just a template for the week.
And to your point, Emma, there, we said she's been brainwashed. It took Andrew a while to get there. She said she didn't wake up one morning and do this. But she got to the point where she realized, actually, you know what, the benefits of doing this outweigh the pain of having to structure it.
I love what Anne says, and you are so right. Lack of planning on your part doesn't constitute an emergency on mine.
It certainly shouldn't. Absolutely.
Because the other thing that you get when you create these healthy boundaries is you can push back very politely to very domineering personalities or lion personalities who they want things done now, because the only time is now, and whatever you're doing, you need to shift. But you can now have a conversation to say, I will do it, but I can do it on Thursday afternoon, or, you know, you can work it into your schedule and manage other people rather than be at the beck and call really of other people's agendas. And that's both for people at work and people at home.
Yeah.
But as you can tell, we could share so much about this. The last thing I want to say is, I know we've had whistle-stop tours every week. If you wanted to continue the learning around the 4 habits, there is a 30 Days to Better Relationship series that you can plug into. Just short inspirational tips in your inbox every day. It's like a 3-minute read, or there's a 2-minute audio that you can listen to. And that link is in the chat box as well.
But think of it, it's kind of like a devotional without the scripture verses and so on, because it's just out there. It's a short thing that you can read every day, but just to remind you of the things to be thinking about, the principles, a few tips things to apply for the day to improve your relationships. And as it says, get you to better relationships over time.
Yeah, great.
And with that, should we go back
hand back to Mark.
Hand back to Mark and Steph and
see if there are any other questions that we have around this.
Hello.
Wow.
Fantastic. I love the weekly schedule.
Yeah.
I'm quite excited about that.
You've really got lots of ideas.
Well, I've got lots of, I'm a schedule girl, but that's gone out the window during the lockdown. So I think I'm going to, it prompted me to go back onto that. So thank you.
It does go out the window, and that's why ours change roughly every term time or every half term time when the boys' schedules change. And it's just thinking about those big rocks. Where do you want to put the key things in, so you can manage everybody else around the things that are important for you to get done.
And just on that point, actually, of planning, you know, I think one of the, if you like, the themes overarching everything you've been talking about, and also the preceding weeks, has been this theme of intentionality. Yeah. And, you know, you guys came up with some gold phrases, but one of my favorites was freewheeling life sets you up for stress. And that's just brilliant. I'm going to print that out and have it on the wall. But, you know, it does go against the grain, because I just feel like it's easier just letting life carry me as opposed to being intentional. And, you know, when you guys talk about, you know, what's your value system, what your expectations, it feels almost overwhelming. So how do we start those first small steps? How would you recommend us to go down this path of intentionality?
Yeah, the question John asked, what greats, was where I started, because I found that I was working and the boys would come in and start calling for my attention. I'd be saying, no, I don't have time. And then I'm thinking, but that's why I'm working from home. Why don't I have time? And that would grate. Or I would have a colleague call me at 7 or 8 o'clock at night when they were younger and feel like I need to be doing dinner and sorting them out, but I need to respond to this call. And why are they calling me at this time? And that would grate. And that's how I started to discover the things that I really valued. The other thing you can do is ask yourself the question, what is it that you talk about doing one day? Well, when is one day? And there's an exercise we can do that can be quite painful for those who are beyond 50, which is if you subtract the number of decades that you've already lived, so in my case 5 and a bit, and then
I counted that very quickly for me.
and then subtract, let's say we're going to have, please God, 7 decades, 8 decades. Subtract the decades you've already lived, subtract another decade or 2 for the amount of time you want to take it easy. Then how many decades do you have left to do the thing you want to do? I mean, that kind of brings life into sharp focus, which is how we ended up doing this business, because it's, if we don't do it now, when are we going to do it?
And that clock is ticking.
And that helps you identify your value and start making space in your diary to live those things out. But just draw a schedule of what you think it could look like. Try it out. If that doesn't work or something's missing, do another one and just keep trying. The point is to be intentional. Don't let life just happen, because whether it's your weight, whether it's your health, whatever it is, it will only go south. Your relationship, it will never accidentally succeed. We have to be intentional.
Yeah, absolutely love that. Thank you. Just some golden nuggets there. And just to say, all of you guys online, do put your questions. I can see stuff coming here. Dave here. Hello, Dave. Look at that. About -12. Wow. Used to a format.
Keep going.
Pray for extension.
Yeah. Well, as you send your questions in, Steph, I know you had a question.
Yeah, I had a
about
question.
Being a mum.
Being a stay-at-home mum, so in this season, I found that, how do you set the boundaries? Because I find that my family think that I'm just available all the time for them, because I'm a stay-at-home mum and I don't have a job aside from that. So I found for me that's been quite a juggle, trying to run the home, homeschool, and look after 3 young children. And not having any time for me, and the boundaries that mummies needs, how do I manage that in a better way?
Great question.
It's a brilliant question, and it's gonna come back to the schedule, because without the schedule, what we do is we look for white space. Is there white space in the diary? I'm gonna shove something in there without seeing what it's costing you, either in terms of your own time with your husband, time with the kids. And then if we don't drive our own bus, anybody will jump in the driving seat. So they'll say, you're free. And you go, well, actually, I am free, because I could push everything to another day. But what's it costing you? And until we've put those big rocks in, you don't know what it's costing you. And it's easy to just look for white space.
And having the schedule in space, what's liberating about that is when one of them comes and says, can you do X, Y, Z? You then have the power to say, actually, I can't. But what's good is I'm allowed for that at X, Y, Z time. And so everybody knows when you've allowed for it. Because if you don't, you'll kind of just say, well, okay, let's put it into this white space. It looks like a space to work in it now. No, mommy's doing this now, but this is time for me. I need to refresh, whatever it happens to be that you're doing there. But don't feel bad about it, because I do have this time. It's all allowed for. Come back at 6 o'clock, we can do it then, or whatever time it is.
Or you can lead it. You can lead it and get them to train them in the habit of saying, on Friday afternoon, why don't we do this? Or why don't we plan to X, Y, and Z, so that they get their time as well, but you're in control of when it happens.
Well, and to be fair, you don't have to be as rigid as that all the time.
It
could be the case where you say, actually, you know what? I was expecting to do this at 4 o'clock today. You've got some time now. Let's do it now, but I won't be able to do it at 4. I'm going to have to swap it at 4, and I'll be able to do my other thing at 4. But let's do it now. Whatever, you have the flexibility to do that. But at least you know what you're swapping the times for. And then you don't end up feeling like I've given everything, I've got nothing left for me.
Yeah, that's really good.
That is so good. And just noticed Ben has put a question here, saying that we felt quite a bit of pressure from both sides of the family in managing expectations of what family time should be, and seeing our young kids. Any advice on how to manage that? What a great question from Ben.
I know, because then there is the kind of emotions and the respect and all the things to manage there. But again, it's gently suggesting, can we do it on, or let's do it on this, such and such a date, and being proactive with them to kind of train them into the idea that this is when it works.
Yeah.
And if you have your schedule, and I don't want it to sound rigid, and we're not talking about, only between 5 and 6. We're talking about blocks of time where you're focusing your attention so you can be fully present in whatever you're doing. If you give space to the family time for family to come round, then you can indulge it, you can enjoy it, you can do it with abandon and not be stressed and worrying about other things, and they'll respect that. They'll appreciate it even more. So find a time that works for you and be proactive. Say, hey, can we meet up on this day? Can we make this one the routine because it doesn't work at this time? And people will understand. I find that most of the time we get it wrong because we don't have our own boundaries. We don't have our own big blocks in place. So anything goes. And then we stress when we try to juggle all the balls into the same leftover time. It should be the other way around.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And, I love about the rocks, but, I think that suggests that, and you said earlier, be true to yourself. And I think that what's really interesting as we kind of reflect on this lockdown period is we talked about, the magnifying glass. This is a very unique time to understand ourselves and our pressure points in a way in which pre-lockdown wasn't there necessarily. So how would you recommend a healthy way to kind of explore that and understand who you are and what is, being true to yourself, what that means for you?
That's a really good question. And I would say it has to come from self-reflection. It has to come from observing who you're being at different times of the day or in different moments, how you're showing up, whether you're easily triggered and what's causing it. I know there was a time where I noticed that I was just becoming a monster at nighttime because I was so tired and bedtime was getting later and later and I wasn't turning up well. And I had to give myself some time out to say, okay, this isn't working and this isn't who I want to be with the boys. I want bedtime to be special and precious and great memories. So I decided to be more rigid about when dinner time was so we can manage the bedtime routine before I get too tired. So it's about observing how you're showing up. And if you're brave enough, asking those around you how you're being and what you might need to do differently as a person.
And to add to that, I guess, and for myself, because I'm very much a structured planner, for me, the 8 Fs now work very well because what it allows me to do is at the beginning of the year, rather than people do, what's your New Year's resolution or what have you, I just take time to just think in those 8 areas, what do I want to achieve this year? What do I want my faith to look like? What do I want my relationship with the family to look like in that space? And when I come across a verse like, what is it, 1 Corinthians 13, I'm just thinking, love is patient, love is kind. So I'll put that down. I like to write it down week by week. If I were to show you my diary, you'd see I have these 8 Fs there. And the thinking is, I don't fill all of them in all the time. But for some of them, I'll just put in for our family. Okay, I need to remember to show more love to the family this week, and I'll put it in there. Because for me, if I look at my diary and I see it there, I'll be reminded. If I don't, it just drops off the radar and you just kind of get busy with life doing all sorts of things. So for me, it's a constant reminder to just come back. What's important to me? And just go back to that. Oh, okay, it's in front of me now. Okay, I remember I need to do a bit of that. Or I need to focus on this in my fulfillment area. Because again, life is busy. If it's not in front of you, it drops off the radar.
And it's also, we know ourselves. We know we can all think of one thing that we'd like to improve. And if you just start with that one thing, what do you need to do to show up better or to manage that one better, then start there.
Yeah, I love that. Start with that one thing. Really I have many, so that's going to be difficult for me. But I'll grab the list off Steph and I'll start with number 1. Pen and paper.
There you go.
Yeah, just start with the one thing. Life is a journey. Life is a journey. But what this is about is being clear on the lane you're gonna swim in, so you can stay swimming in that lane and not comparing. You remember it was it Jenna's message? To stop comparing. This helps you totally, and this helps you to stop comparing, because what other people do and what they're getting busy with is their business and their calling. This is your lane. Not your business.
I'm just seeing a question in there from Paige saying, as a shift worker, I struggle to fit in the big rocks when I'm not working. How can I schedule and rest as well as the important things?
Yeah,
absolutely, Paige. You've got to do it. I mean, for us, we found that we had this ambition of having a relaxing weekend, but with all the various things that we have going on, things creep into the weekend. So it got to the point where you're working Saturday and Sunday on different things. So we had to sort of just pull back again. It was probably beginning of this year, wasn't it, when we were talking about Sabbath?
Lockdown, where we implemented
talking about rest. And we said, actually, you know what? We're going to just ring fence Sunday for us as our Sabbath. And what that meant is you say, okay, well, we've got to clean the house and get all that other stuff done before Sunday, because you can't be doing the cleaning on a Sunday. Sunday is our downtime. This means you end up being a little bit busier maybe in the other times, but you have that time where you say, you know what? I know I've got things to do, but this is rest time. And the other things will be tomorrow or the previous day or what have you.
And just to come, an idea for you, Paige, when you have shift work, I know the pattern of your week can be very different week to week. So it might be that you need to do a schedule for 2 weeks or a schedule for the month where you can counterbalance things. If it's off balance 1 week, you might not be able to do something 1 week, but you can do it the next week based on what your schedule looks like. But getting those big rocks in is your priority. Otherwise, life will happen to you rather than you live in the life that you want to live.
Wow. And that is just, I love that phrase. Absolutely. Mindful of the time, we've probably got a few more minutes. It runs away with you, doesn't it?
It does.
Let's spend way more time, you guys have been so generous with your time. Thank you. Are there any last points you guys want to make? I want to hand over to you guys for the final word.
I think we want to end where we started, which is about, ask, don't assume, is about learning to identify your own values, the things that are really important to you. Create healthy boundaries around them so you can give it the time and the space that they need on a regular basis, if not weekly, maybe bi-weekly or monthly, but that there is something that you are being intentional about driving forward because those things are important to you. And the more clarity we have about that, the more we can have sometimes courageous conversations, but conversations anyway around the things that are important to you. You can ask for what you want and need in relationships. Create healthy relationships of mutual trust and respect because you're able to talk about the things that are really important to you on both sides.
Yeah. And I'd say maybe even bigger picture than that. In relationships, you need to be intentional to have a successful relationship. Relationships don't just get better and better and better just without work. It's think of it as an investment. You've got to invest in the relationship to get the rewards out of it. If you put in the investment, there are no guarantees in life, but 9 times out of 10 you get the rewards back. If you don't, well, you get back what you put into it. You don't invest in the relationship. Don't be surprised if the relationship ends up going on a downward spiral. This is people. People have feelings. They have values. Faith leaks. Well, relationships leak as well.
Yeah.
Unless we're investing in them and making the people around us feel valued and feel special, somebody somewhere else out there is going to make them feel valued and special. And if we're not making them ourselves feel valued and special, we're leaving them vulnerable to the approaches of other people. If our relationships are important to us, we want to keep them together. We've got to invest in them to keep those relationships strong. So be intentional about your relationships. Don't wait on things until things start going difficult or bad to then work on them. Just be on purpose about investing in your relationship all the time. You keep your relationships on track when you do that.
Yeah.
That is just so wonderful. I want to say a big thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been absolutely wonderful.
Our pleasure. As you can tell, we could talk about this all night, so we'll just stop now.
Yeah, we could. I mean, you guys, as I said before, you've been so generous with your time and just the wealth of experience that you bring. We're so grateful. Thank you for these past 3 weeks. And thank you to Trevor and Maria, who couldn't be with us this evening, but, they've just done a fantastic job as well. And just a reminder for everyone who is watching this, you can catch up with the previous 2 weeks. They are on our Facebook page. And equally, the website that people can go to, the4habits.com.
Yeah,
right.
number 4. Or actually both will
Both
work.
will work. Number
Both
4,
will
spell
work.
it out. Either way, it'll work.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And people can find out more. And there's that 30 days to better relationships, which are just so exciting. I know that's something that
Definitely look at, I think,
we're going to be looking at and diving into. So
Great.
with that, why don't we pray?
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
And then we can end. Wonderful. Well, Lord, we want to thank you for this time. It is true, Lord, that it's a kingdom principle that we reap what we sow.
Absolutely.
You know, it says that if you that if you sow in the things of the flesh, you'll reap the things of the flesh. But if you sow in the things of the Spirit, you will reap the things of the Spirit. And Lord, your Spirit is just prompting us now, Lord, just to sow into all that you have for us. And that includes healthy relationships, Lord. And I pray, Holy Spirit, that you would help us. Thank you that you have been sent by our Father to equip us and to empower us to walk in all the fullness that you have for us. So, Holy Spirit, I pray right now, Lord, that you would help us as we move in healthy relationships. Open our eyes to the questions we need to ask and to the answers that you have for us. And we pray, Lord, for the amazing seeds that Jon and Andrea have sown into so many over these past 3 weeks, that they would bear fruit, Lord Jesus. We pray for a harvest of healthy relationships that bring you glory, Lord Jesus. And lastly, we just pray a blessing on Jon and Andrea. Thank you for the time they spent, for their heart for you and for your people and for your kingdom. And would you bless them, Lord, as they have given out? Would you pour into them, we pray, in your precious name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful time for the last session.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us. It's been lovely, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been really wonderful. So everyone, enjoy your evening. Don't forget to see you on Sunday for our church online. A bit of a plug there. And lots is happening throughout the week as well. There is Breakthrough tomorrow night, prayer online at 8:15. You go to the What's On page of our website, you can sign up then. And wonderful. Well, enjoy your evening. God bless you, Jon and Andrea.
Bye,
Thank you very
everybody.
much.
Thank you. All right. Take care.